Guten Tag. Daniel, Shabbat Tov. Here we go. Yidden. Slichas night. Oh, this is good. Great. Here we go. Here we go. All right, we're good, we're great. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Mem. Before we begin, just properly sharing the word that I heard from my father, that I heard from his father, that if a chassid says that I saw with my own eyes, hat mistame gehört. Und als der Chassid sagt, ich habe gehört, ist nicht gestiegen und nicht geflogen. That's just to be medayik, the lashon as I received it. We are in middle of a sugya. We learned that if a goy violates an Isur Doiraisa for a Yid, even if he did it for a specific Jew, no Jew is allowed to derive benefit from that action, not only not on that day, but even Motzoi Shabbos or Motzoi Yom Tov, you have to wait b'chtei sheyasu. Here we are learning that if a guy brought something chutz l'tchum, since taking something beyond the tchum is only forbidden rabbinically, here we differentiate that for the Jew that he brought it for, that Yid cannot benefit. But another Yid is allowed to benefit. So we're going to be learning more details about this sugya, and we're going to be starting based on the Mishnah we had on the Achlamet test, the second part of the Mishnah, when Rabbi Ben Horkinos was mentioning that when he davens Rosh Hashanah, first of all, he said two details. Number one, that it might be, it might not be. So he made his tefillos on condition. He said before that if today, then it's today. If not, then it's not. And on the second day, Rosh Hashanah, if today is Rosh Hashanah, if yesterday was Rosh Hashanah, he made a tefillah al tanai because there were times that he taka had a suffix whether that day was Rosh Hashanah or not. And then also, he was actually specifically referring to mentioning Rosh Chodesh during the tefillahs of Rosh Hashanah. And that's going to occupy a big portion of today's daf. There are actually three options when it comes to mentioning Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Option number one is you don't mention it at all because it's not like something else. Rosh Hashanah is like a super Rosh Chodesh. It's not only Rosh Chodesh, it's the beginning of the year. So it's Keilu B'chlal Mosayim Mana or Shraga V'tira Mayahani Lei. Perhaps it's not mentioned at all. And then if you do mention Rosh Chodesh, we have two ways of mentioning it. One will be in a way of koilul. Koilul means is that you're not giving for Rosh Chodesh, in our case, a bracha for itself. You are including it in a bracha. Like Mekadesh, HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'Yom HaKippurim. So you are being koilul two items, specifying each one, but on one bracha. And then there's actually a concept of designating a specific bracha b'fnei atzmai for Rosh Chodesh. So we're going to go through these options, not only Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah, but regarding other nuances that we all take for granted, that we already have a siddur printed. But when you're going to learn this Gemara, you're going to say, wow, you never thought about that. We're going to be speaking about B'chlal, where you mentioned, let's say, Rosh Chodesh during davening, the difference between Ma'ariv, Shachris, and Mincha versus Musaf, v'chulei, v'chulei. From there, we're going to go on to learn about Shehechiyanu. Is Shehechiyanu mentioned on special days that are not the regalim? which means are they mentioned on Rosh Hashanah? Are they mentioned on Yom Kippur? And if you're going to say Shechayanu on Yom Kippur, so the premise of the Gemara's question is that normally it's said while you are holding and drinking a cup of wine. Not only holding, but you are also making a Bari Priyagofen. All of that will make it extremely difficult. What do you do Yom Kippur? How, if Shechayanu has to be made ala kois, how would you make it on Yom Kippur? And is there an option of you making the bracha and the Bari Priyagofen and then giving it to a child to drink? We're going to learn fascinating concepts regarding Birchas Hanehenen, that perhaps Bachlal, you can make a bracha for someone else to derive benefit. Parenthetically, nowadays, our minig is that since that during the 9 days in Golus, we don't drink wine, and being that we're medagdek to make Havdalah dafke on wine, as the Alter Rebbe paskins, so we take and make Havdalah, and if there is a child that is already in the age of being educated to make brachas, but is not yet old enough to appreciate and to be part of the mourning of the Churban, then our minig is to give it to that child to drink. This is also something that has a link to Daf Mem on the days, and if we'll have time in this stuff, we're going to go on mamash me'inyan le'inyan. It's broader than ERUVIN topics. When people fast on Friday, now b'chlal, you have public fast days and you have private fast days and you have a tainus cholim. But when there would be a fast day on Friday, do we say that it's prohibited to complete the fast? You can fast, but only until right before Shabbos comes in, because since Shabbos is a day in which one is not allowed to subject himself to affliction, it's a day of tainug, so maybe we'll see you would have to break your fast right before the beginning of Shabbos, and that's going to actually continue on Daf Mem Aleph, and there'll be interesting topics that are not necessarily ERUVIN related until the end of this page. We left off on Daf Mem, we left off 6 lines from the top of the Amid, in middle of the line, Hahu Lifta. Again, we just mentioned that if something is being brought, if it's brought for one Yid, another Yid is allowed to derive benefit on the day, even though the malacha was done by a goy, because he only violated a rabbinic violation, which is carrying from beyond the tchum. Okay, we're not speaking obviously about Shabbos. There's the Itzur HaBhoitzah, that's Doiraisa, but let's say on Yom. Okay. Says the Gemara, Hahu Lifta, there was a turnip, a story about a turnip. The Asalam Mechaiza that was brought by Goyim on Yom Tiv to the city of Mechaiza, in which Rava was the Marada Asra. And now there are 2 issues here. Chevre, Yom Tiv, again, there was no issue midairaisa of carrying, but yes, there is a rabbinic problem with going beyond the tchum. But there's something else here. If this turnip was harvested on the day of Yom Tiv, well, then a Isur Doiraisa was performed. Again, and if it was done for a Yid, then it's going to be Isur for any Yid to have any Yamna, not only not Boy Bayoim, but he'll have to wait. So says the Gemara, Nafik Rabbi went out, Chazi Lichanishan, he saw that it withered. He knew how to look at a vegetable and know whether it was harvested today or yesterday. Especially then there was no refrigeration. And he saw that it's not fresh. In other words, he knew that there was no Doiraisa that happened today. So Shara Ravin Lemizban Mineim. Rava allowed Eden to buy it from him on Yom Tiv. Now I know we never spoke about this with great details. Yes, we did learn some details in Masechta Shabbos. We'll be learning about this topic more in further Masechtas. And that is, we also mentioned this is from Masechtas Beya, but we mentioned this in Shabbos, that with certain restrictions, one is allowed to make a purchase on Shabbos and Yom Tiv. If you need to have food, obviously you're not exchanging money, and there are many specifications that will not be allowed to be made, and obviously all these restrictions were being followed. The question was not about whether you can make that transaction to buy something on credit, but again, you're going to buy that turnip to eat it. Rabbi said you can eat it. Why? Amari says, from the fact that I see that it's chemisha, is ma'asmal nekra. I know that there was no koitzer today. So my omrat, what will be the issue here? He brought it out beyond the tchum. Okay, so here says Rabbi, as we learned on top of the Amid, if a guy does something for a Yid, but for the Uven, we say muter lechel Yisrael acher, Shimon can derive benefit. Is kolchchein sagt Rava, hi, this turnip, the adata de nachremasa, he brought it to Mechuzah, or to Mechaiza, to sell it to the general population. He Bechlal didn't have in mind any Yid. Is avada that you can buy it from him. However, even the chaz of the Kamapshi, when he saw that other merchants, hearing that the Rav allowed Yidden to purchase with the restrictions of purchasing on Yom Tov vegetables, they began to bring more turnips or other vegetables, and now they were bringing it for the Yidden, for the Jewish population, even though it wasn't for any specific Yid in mind, but it was for the local community. So now, Asayluhu, like we also learned above, right, that those who held that anything brought to the Reish Galusas really being bought for all the Yidden or for the Rabbanon. So similar, this parallels and discloses the sugya we had above. Like it. There were certain Yidden that they made a parnasa of making canopies. And that canopy, whether it is for a chas and kala or for other reasons, traditionally would also have on it, or it was actually made out of hadassim. So it was common that the goyim that grew hadassim, they would constantly bring hadassim to these genonas. The goes yantiv sheni that they caught hadassim, goyim caught hadassim on the second day yantiv. Now, as we learned above, the second day yantiv, right, according to many opinions, even in Rabbi Yossi, it's mamash a safek, and taked was a safek, and now it's a minhag aviseinu b'yedenu to keep it, and now we actually know that it's not. We actually know that the second day yantiv is not yantiv, but we still keep it in the minute. Is lo'urta shadal ravina? They cut it for the Jewish canopy makers. Right, matzah yantiv. Ravina allowed for them to benefit from it by smelling it immediately. There was no need. Now, why not? This obviously was cut for these genanas who needed to constantly purchase hadassim. So here there's something else, that since Yom Tov Sheni is such a weak Yom Tov, because it's a minhag aviseinu b'yodenu, so here there is bechlal no b'chtei sheyasu. That was the base for Ravina's psagdim. So Amalei Rava bar Tachlita leRavina leisar lohumar b'pnei she'eino b'nei Torah. Listen, theoretically you're right. You know, now that we have a calendar, it's only minhag aviseinu b'yodenu that they used to keep misafik, so you can be maybe more lenient, meaning not to use it on Yom Tov, but right after Yom Tov to smell it. But Zakt Rashi, since they're not b'nei Torah, if you would make this leeway regarding Yom Tov Sheni, they might b'chwal be mezalzel in Yom Tov Sheni. And therefore, he objected any sort of leniency. Where did we have this last? I was not well then. Right, Danny, you were teaching Shabbos Chav Gimel. That was the whole sugya that we make brachas for the Rabbanans. Because Hashem Kedushaну b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu, God commanded us that lo sasur v'chulei. But if you have a suffix midrabanan, remember demai, you don't make a bracha for afrashas demai. Ayat said derabanan, but it's for a suffix. So if that's the case, how do you make kiddush on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius? It's a suffix. Don't make a bracha. So there also we have the same svara that Chazal already understood that Yidden might come to be mezalzel on Yom Tov Sheni of Golus, and to prevent people of don't give any opening of weakness. Here we do make a bracha. Even today, sadly, the last moments of Golus, you know, Yidden that they think they're learned, and they already say, it's second day Yom Tov. People are mezalzel if they're not doing Torah. And therefore, he was upset with this whole leniency. Maskiv law, Rav Shammai, Talmud de'emin b'nei Torah. Even your only objection is only because of that. Meaning, Habnei Torah Shari? No. I hold that B'chlal Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golus is like any other Yom Tov. And if a guy did a Isur D'Oraisa, which he did over here, no matter for whom, but no, it's an Isur D'Oraisa, then not only can you not benefit on Yom Tov, you would have to wait B'chtei Sheyasu, not La'altiv. So Oslu and Shailu L'Rava, and indeed Amar Lohu Be'inan B'chtei Sheyasu. All right, good. Now we're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah Daf Lametes, like we mentioned, I'm just going back to read it. That Rabdoisa ben Horkinos Oimer Ha'over Lifnei HaTeva B'Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Oimer Hachlitzenu Hashem Elokeinu Es Yom Rosh HaChodesh Hazeh Im Hayom Va'im L'Machar. He's really saying two dinim. Number one, he's saying that Rosh Chodesh is explicitly mentioned during the tefillas of Rosh Hashanah, And number two, he's saying that you make a tefillah al tanai because you don't know whether it's indeed Rosh Hashanah or not. And then the Mishnah concluded, when we learned yesterday the Mishnah, we learned Rashi, that Rashi already said that that's the Gemara that Rashi was referring to. What part of Rav Doisa's din do the Chachamim not agree with? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, ki avinon bei Rafuna, when we were in yeshiva with our Rosh Yeshiva Rafuna, I can't read it, but it's erased. So I think we asked him.
It says lon.
I'm sorry, he asked us, Ma'u lahaskir shel Rosh Chodesh v'Rosh Hashanah. Bechlal, he says, do you mention any mention of Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah? Why, yeah, why not? Do we say that Kiven the Chalukin the Musafin, since on Rosh Hashanah, aside of the Karbanis,
they asked Rav Huna this question.
Okay, so then he's saying they asked Rav Huna, okay, I'm not so sure, but could be. So the question is like this, that since on Rosh Hashanah, aside of the Karbanis of Rosh Hashanah, we also bring special Karbanis, which we call Musaf for Rosh Chodesh. So then, Tefilla is b'makayim karbanos, where we had that question in brachos. That was one of the opinions, and therefore, yes, amrinan, it should be mentioned. Or Dilma, no. Why no? Because since we refer to Rosh Hashanah as Yom HaZikaron, and we find, like Rashi brings, the word Zikaron in reference to Rosh Chodesh. So when you say Zikaron, you are already covering both. That was the question that was asked. You're very good. That was a question that we asked of Rav Huna. So Amarlon, you see, Danny, that's why it bothers me, because if the Ger says lon is plural, right? We asked of him. Anyway, Amarlon, so he told us that he from our Mishnah, we know the answer. That he saw. And the Chachamim disagree. And what do they disagree? And my love that they are disagreeing, not about making a condition, is that the Chachamim hold it's not mentioned. And if that is Takad of Shad in the Machlokes, so then that's the answer. Machlokes, that's Yachid, Rabim, Halachik Rabim, which is that we don't mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. Says the Gemara, no. Who says that the Chachamim were arguing with Rav Doisa regarding mentioning it? No, they mention it. They didn't like you giving an intro to your tefillah that if today is Yom Tov, then my tefillah is a tefillah. You don't make such a stipulation. Why? They don't argue regarding mentioning. They yes argue regarding lahasnois, meaning that you not lahasnois and you don't daven. You daven. You don't just give a condition. You just daven the way it's vaday. And hachinam mistabro because me the tani bebraisa. That similarly that Rav Doisa not Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Chodesh, he also would do what? He would make a stipulation. And the Chachamim did not agree. Now, obviously, that mirrors the Mishnah. And the Pshat and the Braisa, right, there, it's not about mentioning Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. The Braisa is speaking about Rosh Chodesh that's not Rosh Hashanah. That machlokes seemingly is only about whether you make a stipulation or not. So, makes sense. They argue in the Mishnah. They argue in the Braisa. The Chachamim don't allow for us to make stipulations before we daven. Once we are mechuyev to daven because it's a suffix, then daven. But if the machlokes in our Mishnah is only whether you mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah, and the Chachamim say no because Zikaron already means Rosh Chodesh, well, why would they disagree with Rav Doisa when it comes to any other Rosh Chodesh? There they would agree with him. Why would you not mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Chodesh? How can they not agree with him? So they are counters. So it's Elamai. So that machlekes in the Braisa is lahasnois. If that's the case, why do we have to record their machlekes both on Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Chodesh? And any Rosh Chodesh, why would we not infer one from the other? No, the Gemara says that's not correct because tzricha the iash, meaning if they only would have argued on Rosh Hashanah, which is an Mishnah, I would have thought that the reason why the Chachamim say what you don't make a condition, mishum deloy. You don't make a condition, mishum the because again, like we had on top of the Amid, when you hear about Tefilla davening, if today is Rosh Hashanah, then I'll give a beautiful chazanas. You know what people will hear? not the langa chazonis. They're going to hear if, maybe it's not. And a person can violate the Yom Tov, do malachas. What's the fear? What exactly are we not allowed to do on Rosh Chodesh because it's Rosh Chodesh? There's no isur when it comes, there's no shvisas melacha on Rosh Chodesh. So there's no downside. So maybe the Chachamim would have been Moed to Rabdoisa, so they have to argue by Rosh Chodesh. And furthermore, 3 lines from the bottom. The Itmar Baha had they only argued here in the Rosh Chodesh and the Braisa, then I would erroneously say that only Baha Ka'amar Rabdoisa, that you make a condition because Rabdoisa was not afraid of people being Mezalzel. So therefore it makes sense that their argument is regarding Tanai. They're not arguing regarding mentioning it. That's what we're saying. There's a reason why we have to have their machlokes both Rosh Hashanah and every Rosh Chodesh. And now, at least, we didn't certainly resolve it. Could be, could not be. We still have a doubt. And now the Gemara wants to know, indeed, what the halach is. Okay. 1 second. And therefore, if we're concluding that we need to record it twice, we are concluding that they argue only regarding lahasnois, but lahaskid, everyone subscribes that you mentioned Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Now, like we mentioned in the introduction, when you say mentioning it, the emes is there are 3 options, and that's what the Gemara is going to clarify. One option is b'chlal not to mention it. But even if you do mention it, how would you mention it? There's 2 ways. You can give that special day here, in our case, Rosh Chodesh, its own bracha, or you can be koilel it, you can include it in the bracha that you're making anyways. Right now, we are thinking, that's the havamina, the premise of the kasha is that if everyone says that you do mention it, l'chayret means that you give it its own bracha. Now asks the Gemara on that. Says in the Braisa, and at the Sefta, Rosh Hashanah Shchaliyas b'Shabbos, Rameshad, this coming week, Tavshin Pei Aleph, Beishama Yomrim, that Mispalel Eser. What are we talking about? Obviously, Shabbos and Yom Tov, Shemona Esrei has 7 tefillos, 7 brachas. We're speaking about the uniqueness of Rosh Hashanah, Musaf. And Musaf, Rosh Hashanah, has 9 brachas. Says Beishama, if it's Shabbos, you daven 10. Why? Because Shabbos is not included in. You make a standalone bracha for Shabbos. Besilol says no, mispalal teisha. Now asks the Gemara, in Nisa, like we are saying above, that even the Chachamim agree to Rabdoisa that Rosh Chodesh is mentioned on the Rosh Hashanah. So why are they saying 9 or 10? Beishamai should gar say 11, right? Beishamai achas esrei mi boyelei, because you also have Rosh Chodesh. Says the Gemara Daf Mem Amud Beis, Omar Rab Zeira. No, that's not a kasha. Shani Rosh Chodesh. Yes, our Mishnah stands. It's mentioned, but not like Beishamai holds that Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos gets its own bracha. Even Beishamai will hold that Rosh Chodesh will not get its own bracha. Why not? Because Mishmetoich Shekoilel L'Shachris Va'arvis, since one combines. Forget about the Musaf. On Maidev, on Shachris, really it's on Mincha. Here, do we mention Rosh Chodesh? Sure we do. But how do we mention Rosh Chodesh? It doesn't have a standalone bracha. It's mentioned in. So therefore, Koilel bin Musafin makes a lot of sense. Even Beishamai will be Moed. Now guys, let's read inside Rashi. It's a small daf, relatively a small daf, a very geshmak Rashi, like all the Rashis. Omar Rav Zaid on top of the Amid. Like we explained our Mishnah. Both Rabbi and the Chachamim hold that Rosh Chodesh is mentioned. Umiu, even the Beishamai, right, that holds that Shabbos gets its own bracha, but not for Rosh Chodesh. Bracha ba'anpi nafshel l'Rosh Chodesh loibo. Why? The lav mishum, the word zikaron of Rosh Hashanah oiloloi. The mashma, the kivon the Rosh Hashanah who hainu Rosh Chodesh. No. That's not why. Because the Havas Nami Shabbos Virosh Chodesh. The Lav Rosh Hashanah, forget about Rosh Hashanah. Takat Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, still, even by Shammai, what would you do? Which is what we do in the Ata Yatzarta. Elochoisim, the first narrow line in Rashi, Mekadesh Shabbos V'Yisrael Rosh Chadash. But since Rosh Chodesh never occupies its own bracha, v'hilkach, and Rosh Hashanah nami choisem mekadosh Yisrael, v'yoyim hazikaron l'Rosh Chodesh. V'af al gav de b'Shabbos v'Rosh Hashanah boy l'chol chad v'chad bracha b'fnei atzmai. We're speaking shitas Beis Shammai. That's not the way we pass it, but that's Beis Shammai. Nevertheless, b'Rosh Chodesh moide b'toich shekoilel b'rchasei b'toich b'rchas hayoyim by shachris and arvis v'afilu b'shar shabbosos v'hahi v'adei afilu l'b'shamay pshitolon v'lei boy l'chol chad bracha le'atzmai. And why not? Weiter, going to a weekday, says Rashi. When a Chodesh falls out on the weekday, don't look at Musaf now. Look at the other three tefillos: Ma'ariv, Shachris, and Mincha. Eiloi bracha, Shachris v'Aris, Elo, Oimer Yalav v'Yavoy in Avodah. V'Hilkach. So if it never has its own bracha during the weekday, so when it falls on Shabbos, right? Afilu l'manda Amar l'kaman the Shabbos loy matkirin the Rosh Chodesh ba'avodah elo b'chas hayoyim. Regardless, as we'll learn more details, its zikr will never get its own bracha. Beis Shammai holds Shabbos gets its own bracha. Beis Shammai holds Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos you're gonna have 10. Says the Gemara, umi islay leBeis Shammai koilo, because if it doesn't get its own bracha, again we're saying that everyone is maida that it has to be mentioned. Do we bechlal subscribe that one could be included in another? The Hatanya, Rosh Chodesh Chaliyas b'Shabbos, not Rosh Hashanah. Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. Beis Shammai Yoimrim, listen to this. Mispalel Shmoina. Wow. Mispalel Shmoina means that Shabbos, we know we have 7 brachas. No, you have a bracha bifnei atzmai for Rosh Chodesh. Ubeis Hillel Yoimrim, Mispalel Sheva. So the Gemara says takakasha, but it's not a refutation because it's a big difference, like we just mentioned, when you say that Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. So we want for Shabbos to have its own bracha. We want for Rosh Chodesh to have its own bracha. But when it comes to Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah, I know that we just concluded the Esther Afuna, but we concluded that it's mentioned, but you have to also acknowledge, like we said, that Zikar and Oila Lakan or Lakan, it's a bigger similarity. Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh are completely dissimilar. Here they're the same. It's a concept of Zikaron. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, no, it's takakasha, but it's not a refutation. We're standing that Rosh Chodesh, which is mentioned, will not get a bracha b'fnei atzmai. Says the Gemara that you should know, the koilul atzmai, we're speaking about Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. Is Rosh Chodesh included or not is really a machlokes tanoim. Now, Zikr Musaf, we're going to speak about Rosh Chodesh. We're speaking about your normal Arvis, Shachris, and Mincha. The Tanya, Shabbos Chaliyas b'Rosh Chodesh, or Shabbos falls out on Chol HaMoed. What do? So says the Braisa, Arvis, Shachris, and Mincha, Yudaven, Kedarkoi Sheva, like every Shabbos, and you include it the way we do it. Which is what we call Yalav Yavai, and where do we insert Yalav Yavai? So we know in let's say Machlekes Tanoim. So the Tanakama says in Avodah, and Rabbi Eliezer says that Yalav Yavai is inserted in Hoidah the way we insert Ala Nisim. Very interesting. Now the reason why we put it in Hoidah is because Hoidah is the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, just to know, and the miracles that we mentioned in Hoidah is Chanukah and Purim. So Chassidus says, since we were Moiseh Nefesh, both Nisim came about through an act of Mesiras Nefesh, whether the Mesiras Nefesh was the wars that we waged against the Yevanim, whether the Mesiras Nefesh was the way Chassidus emphasizes that no one converted out, and according to one opinion, which Chassidus keeps on quoting, if, God forbid, the Yidden then would have converted out, if they would have stopped behaving like Yehudim, if they just would have been Ivrim, then Haman wouldn't have killed them. So that was an act of Mesiras Nefesh. So that's why we paskin, that is mentioned in Hoidah, which is the concept of bittul, of bowing down. But be that as it may, we mention it either here or there. Furthermore, and if you forgot to mention in Yalav Yavai, he says the Braisa Machzir Noisai. Just to remind ourselves that there's one nuance that we don't paskin this way, and it's not arguing with the Braisa. The Braisa is not going into all the details. But where did we have this? I think we have this in Brachas or in Shabbos, that if we forget Rosh Chodesh, Yalav Yove, by Ma'ariv, not Cholamoyed. Rosh Chodesh, then we don't have to go back. Okay. Ubi Musaf in the first white line. So what we do is, Maschel B'Shabbos, we're speaking about Musaf, Umesayim B'Shal Shabbos. However, here also, V'oimer Kedushas Hayom Be'emsa. Wow. So says Rashi, 6 lines at the end of the narrow lines. Look at Rashi's Nusach. It's Pashut Geshmake, easy Gemaras. But look at that. How did he begin? How did he begin a Shmoneh Esrei? What do we do on Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Ata Yatzarta? Right. So his Nusach is Vatitein Lanu Es Yom Hamonoyach Hazeh. And then, you only speak about Yom HaManoich. Yom HaManoich is Shabbos, the day of rest. Your Messiah only b'shal Shabbos. You're not koilel it. You don't put it in the bracha, according to these 2 Tanaim. You conclude it with the words Mekadesh HaShabbos. That's not the way we do it, right? V'suloi umiu b'musafim. Okay, and Musaf be'emsa habracha nichlal. I'm sorry. On Shachris, Ma'ariv, Shachris and Mincha, you only mention Yalav Yavim. In Musaf, you do mention it in the middle bracha. Aval Shachris va'arvis eina nichla fila be'ems. V'hai tana leis le'koilol Shachris va'arvis. Notice it's not part, adding Yalav Yavim is not called koilol over here. However, it Hashbag, Rabbi Shmuel ben Oishel Echlam Ruka. Oimrim, no, kol mokim shezakut l'sheva. Any tefillah sheva, any tefillah means, we're speaking about Shabbos, Ma'ariv and Shachris and Mincha, you will be Messiah, Maschel b'shal Shabbos, correct? You'll be Messiah b'shal Shabbos, but you will always mention Kedushas Hayom Be'emsa. Okay. Now we go back to the original question we asked Rafuna. Ma Yav and that's why I remember it wasn't so clear. In other words, it made sense that the Machlekes in our Mishnah is only whether you should make a Tanai. If that would be the case, then everyone is minded that you mention it. But we are still not certain whether Rosh Chodesh is to be mentioned on Musaf Rosh Hashanah. Who remembers our Nusach? What do we do? Do we mention on Musaf Rosh Hashanah that it's Rosh Chodesh anywhere? So my have Allah, Amar Rab Chizda, that Zikaron Echad Oilu Lakan Lakan. Not the way we said on Amad Aleph. It's automatically included when you speak about Yom HaZikaron. It's not mentioned. It's not mentioned separately, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the way we do it. I'm speaking about Nusach Chabad, and maybe there's another Nusach that's very interesting. Just over here on the side, you have from the Daled, who brings this down. The Rambam passes that way, the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, good. And the Rif, weiter. Okay, me'inyan le'inyan. V'omar Rabba Nachamo, that ki avina beit Rafuna. Again, it's Iboyalon. Okay, we asked Rafuna. It must be the same thing. Ma olayim is man. Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim. Should we mention Shachiyanu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Do we say option 1? Kiven the mizman l'zman nasi? Yeah, it's a Yom Tif that comes once a year. So then Amrina on Oidilma, interesting, when it comes to Shachiyanu, Kiven the loy ikra regolim. It's not a pilgrim. We're not obligated to go to Yerushalayim. So loy Amrina. So we asked that from Rafuna and loy have a biyadei. Okay, so Ki Asoy Beit Rav Yehuda. Omar says Rav Yehuda that I don't understand the question. Every time I eat up some new vegetable, I have a new pumpkin, I eat a new squash, I make a shechiyanu on that. So what's the issue? Why would you not be allowed to make a shechiyanu? And now we clarify the question. If you want to make a shechiyanu, of course you could. The question wasn't whether it's a reshus. The question is whether it's a chayvam. So Amrin on lay, reshus like a mivoyali. Or Amar lay, who was one that asked him. The question that I asked of Rafuna, that I'm asking of you is, so Amar Li, so Rabbi Yehuda responded that Rav, his first teacher, right, Shmuel was the second teacher, the Amri Tarvayu, Ein Oimer Zman Ella B'Shalosh Regalim, which means you're not mechuyev to mention Shechiyanu, to make a bracha Shechiyanu, if it's not on the Shalosh Regalim. Says the Gemara Meisvei, we learned in a Braisa, according to Pasuk in Koheles, then Lichelek L'Shiva V'Gam L'Shmoina, give a portion to the 7. Give a portion to the 7. 10 Chelek L'Shiva, what does that mean? And also to the 8, what does that mean? Taichus Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Shiva Elu Zayim Ebereshis. And when God is saying through the Navi, give, right, 10 Chelek, give a portion to the 7. Meaning, what portion? The 7th day. The 7th day is given to God. And Shmoina goes to Ches Yemei Milah. We are giving to God the 8th day. Giving the 8th day? Yeah, we're doing a meal on the 8th day. Rabbi Shua, more. That Shiva, Elu, Shiva Yemei Pesach. Shmoina Elu, Shmoina Yemei HaChag. And V'gam l'rabbis atzeres v'rosh Hashanah v'yom HaKippurim. And what does it mean when we're speaking about giving? Does it all that not include that we give azman abracha shechiyanu? Which says no. No. That means that you make a bracha like mekadosh Yisrael v'azmanim. That's what it means, which is taka what we say. We make an extra bracha for all of these days. And that this pasuk, according to Rabbi Yeshua, is not alluding to a shechiyanu, but dafke to adding to the bracha, changing the bracha, because the Isa that this is a remes for us to mention shechiyanu, sman kol shiva mi ika. He's saying that we can shiva. How is we make a shechiyanu only on the first day? So the Gemara says no. That doesn't mean, that doesn't prove that Rabbi Yeshua for sure was not referring to Zman. Rabbi Yeshua could have referred to Zman. Holy Kasha. Because if what happens, let's go if a person did not have a cup of wine and they were unable to make Kiddush on the first day of Yom Tov, then they would make the Kiddush on the second day, which is Shechiyanu. And the Yoim Achora. And then invite it. And if finally on the 7th day, the first time they have the wine, so even if he would have meant Zman, it could have meant that all 7 days it's shaykh for you to make a shechiyanu. So the Gemara says no. Mikol makayim l'chayra ba'inan kais. And therefore, the havamina is that if you did not have a cup of wine on the first day, how will you have it on the second day? How will you have it on the first day? So for you to still insist that maybe Rabbi Shua was referring to Zman, and you can sometimes say Zman all the 7 days. If you didn't say it on the first day, you can say it on the 7th. You can say it on the next day and on the following day. This will be a proof to Rav Nachman, the Amar Rav Nachman, Zman oimer afilu b'shuk, that no wine is needed. So the Gemara says no. Maybe you have to make a shechiyanu on Yom Tov only when you're holding a cup of wine. And like we mentioned, it means that you're supposed to make Kiddush the first night. If you didn't have wine and you got it on the second day, and that's the first time you're making Kiddush on wine, then you would make a shechiyanu on the second day. And if that way you would have waited until the third day, you would make it on the third day. Halekasha, the ikla leikois. Okay, so therefore it could be that Rabbi Yeshua's remez of this pasuk is that Rabbi Yeshua's interpretation of the pasuk is being meramis to mentioning Zman on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur. Says Gemara, Tanach atzeres v'Rosh Hashanah, but Yom Kippurim hechiyavit. In other words, you're making shechiyanu. Right, we're not going with Rav Nachman that you make a shechiyanu afilu bashuk. You were going that you have to make a shechiyanu holding a cup of wine, and it doesn't just mean to hold it physically in your hands. It means you're making a boide priya gofen and you're making a shechiyanu, and therefore you're going to have to drink. So when exactly would you make a bracha on wine for Yom Kippur? Even if you're going to say, you know what, right before Yom Kippur, right before the fast really begins, make a shechiyanu for Yom Kippur. That is not correct, because kivan the Amar Zman, even if you did it before the Zman of the beginning of the fast, that in itself would be kable alei. That will be one way of being makabel the day, which includes makabel all of the 5 inuim, and v'asarlei. And how do I know that? The Ha'amar leit Abiyim Rabban Abba lirav, like Rashi tells us that there was a time that it got very cloudy in Surah or wherever Rav was then, and they thought it was Friday night, and they davened. And then after the davening, right after the daven, and they were makabel not to do any work. It was Shabbos for them. Then the sky opened up, now it became clear that it's really not yet Shabbos unless you were Makabalit. So we asked Rav, mi badalt, did you still refrain from doing Malachi even though you discovered that you were Makabal Shabbos early? And Amar, yes, in Badilna. What do we see over here? That once he made the brachos for Shabbos and davening, that commenced Shabbos for him. So therefore, even if you were going to make a bracha shachiyanu prior to this man of Yom Kippur, that would commence it. So that's not a solution. What would be the other option? Livroich olev vilanche, and to put it down. In other words, not to make no one should drink it. Making a hagafen, you're making a shachiyanu, you're putting it down. No, hamavarach sarach sheyitay. And you know what? Maybe the solution will be leisvei liyanuka, give it to a child. Look inside the Rashi, 7 lines on the bottom of the Amid in the beginning of the line. Leisvei liyanuka, lishtoisoi la'achar sheyivarech olav, dahai sheyitay dika. When we just learned that hamavarach sarach sheyitay, the literal translation is that when you make a bracha, you have to taste. No, it never means you. Lav dafka, says Rashi. Lav dafka ka'amar amevorech. No, to who adin, anyone. Kishasi achrina, it's going to be good. The tama mishum digenayu lekoishol bracha shelo yehena adam imenu la'alter. Right, really, don't forget that this la'alter is a good deal because you can make a shechiyanu and you can save this wine for tomorrow night, Matzah Yom Kippur. No, it's a genai for you not to partake of it immediately. Shetehei birchas hayayin boire priyagofen shelo yilotzoyder. And therefore, giving it to another is good. But who are we going to give it to? We're going to give it to a child. So maybe that's the way to do it. Back in the Gemara, no, we don't accept that because we don't paskin like Ravacha. Ravacha is the one that says that you can give wine to a child on Yom Kippur, and we don't subscribe to that. You know why? Dilma asil misrach, because you're going to give some kal yamachin. Because when a child eats today on Yom Kippur, right, he understands that really it's a day of fast. Parents are fasting. I'm still a child. I don't have to fast yet. But if there's some part of the Yiddishkeit, part of the day, part of Yom Kippur, is that you give something to a child, that's much worse. He's going to remember, my parents began Yom Kippur by me drinking a cup of wine. God forbid he'll continue to do that even when he's an adult. So now we don't know. So we don't know what Rabbi Yeshua meant, even though we didn't figure that out. How, like, if he meant Zman, how would you do it? So my have Allah. So Shadrua Rabbanon le Rav Yemar Sava Kamed Rav Chizda. Rav Yemar Sava's Kshmoi Kenu, he was an elder. And they decided that the only one that will know is Rav Chizda. Who is going to go and see what Rav Chizda does? They sent Rav Yemar Sava. And they sent him B'male Yoyma Derei Shato. They sent him to be by Rav Chizda Erev Rosh Hashanah. And Amrulei, and they told him, Zil Chazi, go see what he does. Go see what he does. Does he make a shechiyanu or not? And ta aim along and come tell us. Guys, don't forget that the question in the beginning was on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay, so they sent him before Rosh Hashanah. Kichazio, Rab Chizda sees an elder chassid is coming to him. So he very humbly, he said something beautiful. So Amar Lei, this is Rab Chizda told Rav Yemer Sava that the lu'ua l'retiva, if a person picks up a moist piece of wood, something that's retiva, obviously you didn't pick up the moist piece of wood to use it for fuel because it's moist. It must be, there's a reason that rafsa lei beduchte mistama, you need a place. In other words, you came to me, I know you came to me, you're elder, you're greater. Mistama, there's one minig that you guys have a doubt somewhere, and not that I know. I'm just following the Messiahs. Through me, you're going to find out something that you're curious to find out about. It doesn't say that he told him what he's observing, but he right away understood that there's some practice that the communities had a suffix in, and they're looking at him to observe him, and they're going to follow suit. And indeed, what happened? Aisulei Kasa the Chamra and Kaddish, he made Kiddush, this is Rosh Hashanah, and Ba'amar Zman. Says the Gemara V'Hilchaseh that we say Zman Rosh Hashanah Ubiyam Kippurim, and not the way we were rejecting Rav Nachman. Right? We are paskening like Rav Nachman. that the Ilcha says, man, you don't need to say Shechiyanu Dafke when you're holding a cup of wine. Now, interestingly, on Yom Kippur, we take a practice like Rav Nachman. That means we make a Shechiyanu in the beginning of davening, right after Kol Nidre, before Ma'ariv. But that's because there's no Bereder. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, even though the Gemara is saying that we pass like Rav Nachman, you could make it b'shul. If you can make it while you're holding a cup of wine, that's what we should do. And indeed, that's what we pass in, that we make Shechiyanu not only on a Golim during Kiddush and on Yom Kippur, being that there's no option. We don't even, we are against you giving it to a child. So we make Shechiyanu without any wine at all. Let's stop over here, God willing, to be continued in the next year. All right, good. Gan Eden, huh? I'm curious, does anyone mention, Jonathan, do you mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah?
No, so I was thinking, no, and it's interesting, they don't even say here what the nusach would be if we were to say it in Shachris or Ma'ariv. There's no nusach.
Where did we read Yom Zikaron on Rosh Chodesh? No, I think Rashi spoke out.
What the nusach would be if it was to be mentioned?
Rosh Hashanah, when we're speaking on top of the Amid, the Kaddish Shabbos v'Yisrael, Rosh Chodesh. That's what we do.
That's what it would be. I'm saying that's what it would be also. That's what they say they would be for Rosh Hashanah.
V'Yisrael, v'Yom HaZikaron, Rosh Chodesh. Right?
Yeah.
Presumably, you would say Rosh Chodesh first because it's Tader, so you say that probably before, right? Normally we do the Tader one, but whatever. Let me ask you this, Rabbi, on the Shechiyanu. So we say Shechiyanu Yom Kippur night by Kol Nidre, right?
Yeah.
Women that light candles, they make a Shechiyanu when they light. Does that mean they don't make it when they do it in shul?
It's very important. First of all, that's another good thing about the shul. Women make Shechiyanu not only for Yom Kippur. Women make Shechiyanu for Yom Tov when they light the candles. And you're asking when women, if a woman is making Kiddush at home, the husband is by the Rebbe for Yom Tov. So she's going to be making Kiddush. She's not allowed Chiyanu by Kiddush.
Yeah. What about the other way? Don't do it by the lighting, to do it by Kiddush.
We have in the Shulchan Aruch that if a man is lighting the candles, well, you only make one Shechiyanu. So if a woman is doing both, since normally it's on her to light the candles, so she makes the Shechiyanu on the candles even though she's making Kiddush. And it says by the man, it's the opposite, that the man who's lighting candles and making Kiddush, he'll make the Shechiyanu by Kiddush. But it says in the Siddur, and I think I announced it in Shul, because it says in the Machzer, to announce that whoever makes Shechiyanu when they lit the candles is not allowed to say Shechiyanu again. So it's announced, it's in the Machzer.
In Chabad, Rabbi, if it's 2 nights of Rosh Chodesh, and you miss it, if it's only 1 night Rosh Chodesh, and you miss it by Ma'ariv, Ya'alev Yavo,
never go back.
Even if it's 1 day?
Chodesh at night. That was the words of Gemara. I think this wasn't Shabbos or it wasn't the
But even if it's only 1 day?
Nothing to do with 1 day or 2 days. Since
no, so by the Sfardim, they say to say it again, Baravit, if it's only 1 day.
Rosh Chodesh or Chalamayv?
Rosh Chodesh. If it's only 1 night.
Okay, anyways, you don't do that. All right, next daf, Chaver, it's Gavaldik. It's Mamash Geschmack, and there's not, it opens up with a little bit of Agadah, the new Pedic. Fasting on Fridays. What daf was the story, Danny and Brachas with Rabbi Gamliel, daf Chav Zayin, yeah? Who remembers?
We're going to fast this year. We're going to fast this year on Friday, on Tavshin Pei Aleph.
What daf and Brachas, Chaver, did we have the promotion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Take a look somewhere. It's Chav Zayin, right? Chav Zayin, I think. Okay. We have a continuation about this. This doesn't end.
You talk about the whole story with Rabbi Shua, the
right? You want to just make sure it's correct? Just Google it, Nastama.
It's amazing how this year it falls. Everything that's happening this year is in this daf. That it's Shabbat or Shoshana, fasting on Friday. It's happening all this year. Tafshin Pei Aleph, all this stuff is happening.
Amazing. Also is amazing. And the Mashiach is not here. How good that the Iker is Chassav and safe.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Mem Aleph. We left off on Daf Mem Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid by the 2 dots. We are starting a sugya whether one who is fasting on a Friday is allowed to complete the fast, meaning to fast until Tzeisak Yechavim, which means that he or she will be fasting into Shabbos Kodesh. Now, Shabbos is a day of a Tanach. Shabbos is a day that one is not allowed to afflict oneself. So there's a svara here that one maybe would have to break their fast on a minimal level. On a minimal level, we'll speak about the kazayas here. On one hand, it's considered a snack, something chashuv, but it's not considered a meal. Maybe you have to eat a kazayas dafka before Shabbos begins. Now, just to be clear, that we have different types of fast days. You have a time of tzibur. Happens to be that even after we have our fixed calendar, there is nowadays one public fast day that could fall out on Friday, only one, and that is Asar B'Tevis. And mind you, the Abu Draham or whoever is quoted here, that when and if Asar B'Tevis would have fallen out on Shabbos, now it's not Shaykh, we would have fasted even on Shabbos for Asar B'Tevis. But Asar B'Tevis is a good example because it's a public fast day that goes into Shabbos. Nowadays, it's not that common, but it may happen. Someone just told me that he thinks it's happening in Tafshin Pei Aleph in this year. Now you have a Tainus Yachid, which also, if a person made a commitment mincha prior to fast, that is a serious fast. And then you have what we call a Tainus Cholim. So we're going to be speaking now. A Tainus Cholim is something that one may fast on Shabbos. We had this in Brachas. B'chlal, there's an interesting svara that a fast that's connected to the past may never be done on Shabbos. Even Tisha B'Av, the Chaliyas b'Shabbos, which could happen, you don't fast. It becomes a nitcha. But a fast that has to do with the future, which is a Tainus Cholim, you want to prevent some negative thing from happening, where you want to channel that to happen through the fast. Anything that's future related allows you to fast on Shabbos, and that's the svara why if Asar B'Tevis would have fallen on Shabbos, you fast, because it says somewhere, I wish I can know the Shem Oimroi, that someone said that every year, Asar B'Tevis, God decides whether that year will still have Tisha B'Av, because it's the beginning of the Puranos. So it's really not past related, it's future related. But coming back over here, this will be the sugi that we'll be learning about. We're going to have the story that we began on Shabbos, where Rabbi Gamliel, who, according to the group, was overly stringent with Rabbi Yeshua, and they stood up for the honor of Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Gamliel was demoted, and they put in this place Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, and then they made a shalom between them, that we're going to have a continuation of some tension between, holy tension, a machlekes l'shem shamayim, between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel here on Daf Mem Aleph, and God willing, we're going to start the new Perek. The new Perek is still continuing with the same topic of Bakoil Ma'arvin, of Perek Shlishi. The fourth Perek is the Perek of Misha Hoitziyu, is speaking about the following. However your Tchum Shabbos will work, if a person went beyond their Tchum Shabbos, now they are confined to Dalo Damas. They can't go more than that. Now we're going to be speaking about someone that b'mezid walked beyond one's Tchum. But the Mishnah is going to begin with a scenario where Goyim forced you to go beyond your Tchum. It wasn't your fault. Even there, if you are now beyond your Tchum, you're bound to Daladamas. But what happens if they bring you back? Do you get back your old Tchum? We're going to have a case where, if I begin Shabbos here in Los Angeles, I only begin counting my 2,000 amas outside the periphery of Los Angeles, wherever that is. What happens if someone went beyond their Tchum, and we're saying, okay, they're confined to their Daladamas, but beyond their Tchum, they went into Los Angeles. So do we say, look, they're bound to the Daladamas, but since they are in that enclosed area, or they are within that city, which for anyone who began Shabbos in that city, they have that whole city is like their Daladamas, are they allowed to walk in that whole city? Or no? No, you went beyond your Tchum, then you are stuck within your Daladamas. We're going to see it's a machlekes tanoim we'll have in the Mishnah. We're going to begin the Perek. The Gemara will begin with a little bit of Agadata. the three things that cause a person to violate his own will and the will of his creator, the three people that will never see the face of Gehenna. That's because they are living Gehenna in this world with many details. And finally, we're going to learn that the laws of Tchumen isn't only on a person. The laws of Tchumen is also that my stuff, including my food, my produce, my paytas, are bound to my Tchum. And therefore, they're not only bound to my Tchum, but as we are learning that if the person went beyond their Tchum, that person is stuck to Daladamis. If someone else took my paytas beyond the Tchum of its owner, that paytas is also stuck within its Daladamis, and that also might imply that that food may not be eaten. And that's where we'll, at least God willing, begin that, and that studio will continue on Daf Mem Beis. Okay, Chavre Daf Mem, Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Again, we are speaking about how certain Amoraim, while they were in yeshiva, what they asked of the Rosh Yeshiva, the next kasha is Ve'amar Abba, that ki havina on Beit Avuna. When we were in the yeshiva by Rafuna, we asked of Rafuna. The Talmud Chachem, Tamim, the Yosef B'Tanisa Shabbat, that is fasting on Friday. Evidently, it was some Ruchnias Dikeinyan to have a Tainus Yachid Dafka on Shabbos. It could be to enter Shabbos while you're very hungry. Could be for other Ruchnias Dika reasons, but that was obviously some sort of relatively common practice by a Bar Beit Av. That means by Yeshiva. So, okay, I know that they fast, but the question is, Ma'ul Ashlume. Ma'ul Ashlume means, can you finish the fast in night? Or do you have to break it at least a little bit before Shabbos comes in? And Lo Yahava Biyadei Nachamol, as the hemshuk to what we learned in the daf above. Also, like Rav Yehuda. Again, also like we had in the case above. And here, unlike before, Rav Yehuda attempted to answer, here Lo Yahava Biyadei. Amarava Nechsanan. Let's see ourselves. The time we learned in the Brayso Tisha B'Av that falls out on Shabbos, Daf Mem Aleph, or the Chain Erev Tisha B'Av that falls out on Shabbos. Both of these cases, now Tisha B'Av is a fast day. On Shabbos, it's an Nidcha. Erev Tisha B'Av is not a fast day, but we have restrictions regarding what we call the Su'udas HaMafsekes. Restrictions of how much food, meaning we have bread and only one cooked food. We're not allowed to have meat. We're not allowed to drink wine on the Su'udas HaMafsekes. The Braisa is not addressing yet what time. We're not going into the time yet. We're just speaking about the restrictions of food. Says the Braisa that Oichel v'Shoyse kol tzorchai. And umal al shulchanai, even this is even the third meal. Afilu keseuda shloimai b'shatoi. You ever heard that expression? Even like King Solomon in his time. What does the b'shatoi mean? Right? Even like a meal like a shloima hamelech. So Chavre ERUVIN Daf Mem Aleph here. Rashi opens up her eyes. Rashi reminds us the sugya that we have in Gittin and Daf Samaches, where Ashmadai, whether it was permanently or certainly temporarily demoted Shlomo HaMelech, and for a period or forever, he no longer was the wealthy Shlomo HaMelech. So that's just explaining the word B'shatoi, that even if you're having a meal like Shlomo HaMelech had when he was in his height of power, when he was wealthy, v'chulei, you can eat, there are no restrictions. Weiter says the Braisa, Aliyah is Tisha B'Av, the Erev Shabbos, Upa. Tisha B'Av falls on Friday. Now, again, nowadays, because of the calendar, it cannot happen. But in the times of the Braisa, it could. You bring to the person who's fasting food in the amount of an egg. An egg is already, on one hand, a snack. On the other hand, it's not a meal. You have to fast until it gets dark, but you can't fast on Shabbos. So the compromise is to eat a kibetza. Dafka that, not more, not less. And ba'oichel. Why? Kedei shelo yikanis l'Shabbos kishehu ma'umam. Not to enter Shabbos while you are suffering. Clear. Furthermore, v'tanya the bachatz the vav amar Rabbi Yehuda. Pamacha so yinu yoshel l'fnei Rabbi Akiva. And on that year, v'tisha b'av shechal liyos be'erev Shabbos hoya. Tisha B'Av was on Erev Shabbos, which means they were fasting on Friday. However, we brought for Rabbi Akiva a rolling egg. Is that a rolling egg? An egg, when you cook it, when you roast it, right? When you take an egg out of your fridge, you all know this. How do you know if it's raw or not? Dray it. If it turns like a dreidel, then it was cooked. That's the minhag they took. They might cook a roasted egg. Ugermani swallowed it, but without salt. Because like this, it's like in between. It's not like you break your fast. He didn't want to put salt because salt is giving it taste that's not necessary. And it wasn't that he was hungry for the egg. That was the Maisa of Rabbi Akiva. Says the Braisa that Rabbi Yossi Yomer, Mesane u'mashlim, absolutely not. If you have to fast Friday, you fast all the way until the end of the fast day, into Shabbos, until when it's definite dark. Now you have a moide dikatois v'schever on top of the Amid. Like Rabbi Yossi, a generation after Rabbi Akiva, will not argue here with Rabbi Akiva, even though he's a Tanach. Says Tosfos that with the little letters, Tosfos Shantz, right? Beitz Migol Gelos, Perush Rabbeinu Chanano. Listen to this. Kabbalah biyodenu. Ki Rabbi Akiva oises shana mesukenaya. The whole story. How did we begin last class? When a Hassan says he sees the Rebbe, he maybe heard that what happened was Rabbi Akiva was pushed physically not well. And we reveal Rabbi Akiva haroifim, by doctor's orders, they said he's not allowed to fast anymore, and he wanted to fast, so they bring him an egg. Rabbi Yehuda was there, but he didn't know the story behind the story. He didn't know that Rabbi Akiva was ill. He didn't know what the doctors told him. He witnessed Rabbi Akiva eating an egg right before Shabbos comes in. That's what Tosfos says. But Rabbi Yehuda, he relied on what he saw. He saw. Wow, that's kind of amazing. Okay, so bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda is a Chatana. Rabbi Yehuda says that you break your fast. Rabbi Yossi says, Misane umashlim. So here you have...
Did Rabbi Akiva swallow it on purpose instead of chewing it?
It means he ate it.
Yeah.
Jonathan is saying maybe he didn't chew it, not to have less. I know, could be. Okay. Omar Rabbi Yossi. Now Lohen is Mistama. He was against not only Rabbi Yehuda, everyone was with Rabbi Yehuda. On Sunday, that even though we learned in the Braisa that you can have for Shalosh Shudas, you can have whatever you want. You're not limited. You can have meat, you can have drawn, but you can't eat after Shkia. In other words, you are minded that we do fast on Shabbos. We begin a fast, and guys, that's the way we paskin. We begin the fast on Shabbos. Do you not agree with that? They told them, Avol. Again, we have this lashon. Avol means yes, emes. Yes, but. What's the but? It's not the same. So Rabbi Yossi says, well, if you agree to that, if it's allowed in the beginning, it should be allowed at the end. So they said, no. Practical answer, when Tisha B'Av is on Sunday, which is common by us, even if it's a nitcha, we fast on Sunday, you eat the whole Shabbos. If you're going to stop eating, right, by Shkia, you're not Mo'una on Shabbos. It's not ideal, you're restricted, but you don't feel affliction because you ate the whole day. But if you already fasted a whole Friday, and now you had the hardest time is at the end, is the Kanizbah Shumaona, Shoyachol V'Shasa, Kolayim Kulay, Zoisloi. That's the antithesis of Shabbos Kodesh. Okay, we have Machlekes Tanoim. At least we clarified we have a Machlekes Tanoim. Now for Amarula Halacha Rabbi Yossi, that we are mashlim the fast. How can you say that? We learned in a Mishnah and Tainus, ain't goes in Tainus Alatzir. Rosh Chodashim, you don't declare a Tainus lachatchila on Rosh Chodesh, on Chanukah, or on Purim, but the Imis Chilu, we're going to learn soon in Masechta Tainus that there were times that they didn't decree one fast day. They lachatchila decreed a series of fast days, 20 days, 30 days, whether they were consecutive days, whether they were bahabs. But if you are already in a series of fast days, and now one fast day falls out on Chanukah or on Rosh Chodesh or on Purim, says the Tanakama, which is Rabban Gamliel, ein mafsikin divid Rabbi Gamliel. And on that, Amar Rabbi Meir, afal pi shomar Rabbi Gamliel ein mafsikin, taka, you don't b'chlal disregard the fast. Mitzat sheni, it's Rosh Chodesh, it's Chanukah, it's Purim. Don't fast until the end. Moide she'ein mashlimin. Wow. You don't fast now. What does it mean she'ein mashlimin? Does it mean that you break your fast right after Chatzos, or you don't finish it? Hold on. And then he added, this is all Rabbi Meir in Shitas Rabbi Gamliel, V'chein b'tishuv av shechalias be'erev Shabbos, that Rabbi Gamliel holds that you may not complete the day. Now, this in itself, just learning the Mishnah, obviously cannot refute Rabbi Yossi, a Tana, and a Tana. But no, there's a story over here. The Tanya, we learned about Isa elaborating the Mishnah that la'achar pitirosi shal Rabban Gamliel nichnas Rabbi Yeshua lo hafer es devara. This was something that Rabbi Yeshua disagreed with. Rabbi Yeshua did not hold that, like Rabbi Gamliel, that if there's a fast on Friday, that you may not be mashlamit. No, be mashlamit. If Tisha B'Av was on Friday, Rabbi Yeshua held you have to fast until it's dark. And now, when Rabbi Gamliel was alive, Rabbi Yeshua, out of respect for him, did not challenge him. But now that he passed away, right away, Rabbi Yeshua wanted to change it. And he says, I see the basar reisha gufa azal, that the body follows the head. And the body follows the heads. Clearly, when a tzaddik has a histalkus, as we call it, the tzaddik is still here. Just because he's physically not present, so what? Kol yamav shel Rabbi Gamliel, kovanu lachi kemoisai. And now, and now he said, he called out to what was to him a colleague without the Rebbe, Yehoshua ein shoyim lecha, shekvar nikfa halacha ke Rabbi Gamliel. And not only that, the Braisa concludes, this is the end. I think this is the end of the story in Brachas, Daf Chav Zayin, Daf Chav Ches, that at the end, they gave the cover to Rabbi Gamliel. And even though Rabbi Yeshua was against it, they confirmed what he paskened. So here we have a kasha. How can you all say Rabbi Yossi? There was no one they established like Rabbi Gamliel after his ptira. So the Gemara says, hold on, B'doiroi shel Rabbi Gamliel, taka obed ke Rabbi Gamliel. And you know what B'doiroi shel Rabbi Gamliel means? We're the Doira Shvi. Rabbi Gamliel physically passed away. It was Doira of Rabbi Gamliel. But in the next generation, Rabbi Yossi was one generation further. B'doiroi shel Rabbi Yossi, we can still follow like Rabbi Yossi. And that's why the Amoira Ula paskan like Rabbi Yossi. Even B'doiroi shel Rabbi Gamliel, obed ke Rabbi Gamliel, back into Tainus. Rabbi Lazar ben Sadik. Now, my friends, Rabbi Lazar ben Sadik was a contemporary of Rabbi Gamliel, of Rabbi Yeshua. I lived in that time. Ani mibnei Shana of Ben Binyamin. I am from the descendants. Guys, remember, we have this in Tainus, that Tainus Koyach. We're going to have the 9 families that when we built the second Beis HaMikdash and there was a lack of proper wood that's fit to go on the Mizbeach in the earlier years, there were 9 families that took upon themselves to donate wood. And forever, Bizman Bayesheni, the descendants of that families were given the great kavod of being allowed to give wood to the Beis HaMikdash on that date, even though there was enough money in the treasury in the temple to have the wood on their own, but they were given the honor, and it was a real yomtiv for them. Yomtiv meaning that there were aser b'tainis v'chulim. So he says that I am from the descendants of Sunav ben Binyamin, whose yomtiv was on the 10th of Menachem of Pamachas Chal Tisha B'Av Liyas b'Shabbos, and v'dochinu la'achar HaShabbos, and Tisha B'Av was on Shabbos. So Tisha B'Av was fasted on Sunday. Sunday was the 10th of Av. The 10th of Av was his yontiv. So what did our family do? His aninu boy, we fasted because everyone is fasting. Mitzat sheni v'lo hishlamnuhu. We did not conclude the fast. You know why? Because it's our yontiv. I want to make just a ha'ara that everyone speaks about. But don't we say that Bisman Bayesheni, there was no tainus on Tisha B'Av? Lav dafka. This is a source. This happened Bisman Abayis. This happened Bisman Abayis. To say that they had a Yom Tiv after the Churban Abayis, when it's not even shaykh for them to bring wood, doesn't make sense. That when they built the second Beis Hamikdash, like when did we learn this? Like this already in Kachim, there were more people crying than rejoicing, because the people remembered how the Bayis Rishon was, and we're not speaking about the physicality of the temple, we're speaking about the Gilui Alikus, that they saw that this is not the Gilui, this is not the Bayis Rishon. And they fasted on Tisha B'Av. Wow. So let's come back over here. So now it's in first the Gemara, and this all of this.
Rabbi, can you explain what's going on there? Their holiday was on the 10th,
yes,
but the fast was on the 9th. So what were they saying?
He says that there was a year that Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos, and they, well, listen, guys, this could have happened after the Churban, but I'm saying there's a lot of talk about this regarding when did this happen. That they pushed off Tisha B'Av to Sunday, which is what we do, Danny. So they made the fast on his Yom Tov. So he says that what our family did is we didn't, on one hand, not to fast. On the other hand, to fast the whole day. Their shana was we fasted part.
Because it was a nidcha, so they were able to be makel or whatever.
No. Tama, the Yom Tov. What about every year when it's not a nidcha? For them, Yud B'Av was a Yom Tov. So in a normal Tisha B'Av, what's our whole topic, my friends? Can you fast Friday going into Shabbos? Why can't you fast into Shabbos? Because Shabbos is a special day. You can't fast on Yom Tov. So in every year, Ha'ed of Yom Tov, Mashlimin. They only were not Mashlim when it was Boy Bayoim. But if it was about going into, they were Mashlimit. Now again, this happened before the times of Rav Yossi. This happened Rav Loza and Rav Tzadok. Now you have to really find out. Maybe he lived noch before Rabbi Gamliel. So says the Gemara, Opa, Amar Avina, Shana Yontu Shal Divrei. That's something else. Don't our sugya is fasting into Shabbos. Our sugya is fasting into a Do'iraisa de Yom Tov. Yeah, that family had a beautiful minig and they had a Yom Tov, but that's called a Midrabanan. Shemit Mitoich Shemesanan Boy Shois. Since they bechlal, you are allowed to fast on that Yom Tov Shois. Mashlima Bayarviyos. You can go into it. Shabbos, the Emesanan Boy Shois. So therefore, Bisman, guys, all of this is before the era of Rabbi Yossi. So Ein Mashlimin Bayarviyos. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef. That now that we came to a big chiddush, because we just learned a brayso that Rabbi Yeshua was opposed it, and they reinstituted it. If you would not hear from A'ula that we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, you would never dream we paskin like Rabbi Yossi after all these stories. We established like Rabbi Gamliel. So says Rabbi Yosef, as we learned that he had an illness, he became blind, he forgot some of his learning. Sometimes he needed Abaya to remind him. He says, I never heard that Ula said that halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. So Amalei Abaya, no. You actually taught it to us, and the aha Amanatni Alon. And it was regarding the following Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, as we learned about, that Ein goes in Tainus Alat Siva Brosh Chodashim Vechulei, and you Amrin and Allah, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Zu Divrei Rav Meir, Amar Mishum Rabban Gamliel. Avol, you added the Chachamim say, Misane Umashlim. Now, why would you, Rav, say that? This is Rav Yosef quoting Rav. And if he was referring to Chanukah and Purim, right? I'm sorry, if he was referring to everything that it says in the Braisa, clearly, halachic karabim, then you are mashlim fast, even in those Yomim Tovim or Shabbosis that are Doraisa. So again, that's Abaya extrapolating that since you told us Rav, and if Rav meant that the Chachamim argue on everything, really you already taught us that we don't pass like Rabbi Gamliel. So the Gemara says, Loi, you didn't understand. Rav Yosef who said that. He quoted Rav, but Rav was not referring to everything. When do the Chachamim say Yom Mashlim? Only on Chanukah and Purim, and that actually fits with what we just learned. That when it comes to a Drabanan, Yom Tov Shel Divrayim, like in the story of Rabbi Loza and Rav Tzadok, then no problem to fast in their Yom Tov. And Hachi Nami Mistabra, that this is what Rav meant, Daf Mem Aleph on the base, because the Isal Tadaitach that the Chachamim argue Akulu, then it doesn't make sense. Ho boy minei Rabba from Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. So if he had a Rav, and if Rav meant that you always fast in, why did Rabbi Yehuda not have the answer? Well, It must be that Rabbi Yehuda knew what Rav said, but Rav was only adding that the Chachamim argue on a Drabanan. Oh, all the time, the Gemara says that's not a raya. Because the Darish Mazutra Mishmei de Rav Huna Halacha Mis'ana Umashlim Haboyim in a Rabba min Rav Huna. That's how we started today's share. There was a time that Rav Huna didn't know, but like Pashalei, and we know that Rav Zutra darshaned in the name of Rav Huna a psak din. So did he know or did he not know? The vart is when he was younger he didn't know. Then he learned. And he found out, and then he knew. So Hachinami regarding Rabbi Yehuda and Rav, it's not a raya. Hamakama d'shami, hadabasa d'shami. You have no raya. You have no raya. So maybe yeah, maybe not. When Abai tells Rabbi Yosef that you told us, we're not sure. Now we quoted Rav Zutra, Darish, Mazutra, Mishmei Rav Huna, that Hilchas Mis'ane or Mis'anin or Mashlim min. That if there is a fast, guys, this is halacha l'maisa because Asara b'Tevis still can fall out on a Friday. And Mashiach is coming this year, but in the past, what do? We go into Shabbos. Now, there's a very important Tosfos that we do not paskin like this Tosfos. Look inside the top Tosfos. The Ilchas Mis'ano Mashlim Perush. That this whole topic, according to this Tosfos, im Yirtze lahashlim, you are allowed to the Shari lahashlim, right? But you don't have to. You don't have to be mashlim. That's the way Tosfos learns Pshat. Tosfos already brings other Rishonim, and in the Shulchan Aruch, we don't paskin like this Tosfos. We paskin that you must be mashlim ataynis, even if it goes into Shabbos Kodesh. Hadron Allah b'koil ma'arvim. Chavra, we are starting the fourth Perek Misho Itziyohu. We are continuing to learn dinim regarding the Eruv Tchumen, the Rabbanan Dika Halacha, aside of Rabbi Akiva who holds of Da'iraisa, but all the other Tanoim hold that one is not allowed to walk beyond one's 2,000 amas with many details, midrabanan, and now we're going to learn as to what happens if you went beyond your tchum. Says the Mishnah, if someone against their will was removed by a goy beyond their tchum, or ruach ra. Ruach ra means a mental illness. They had a temporary moment of insanity, and they needed to walk, and they went beyond their tchum. So the din is that even though they went there, so to say, b'shoigig, they went there unwillingly, nevertheless, ein loy elo daladamis. And from the Mishnah, we can understand that kol shchein, if the person chose b'mezid to go outside his or her tchum, if now they do tshuva, they are limited to their daladamas. However, Vaiter says the Mishnah, hechziruhu, if whoever took them out brought them back, so now they're back in their tchum, doesn't mean that they have to be back exactly to the place where they started out, but now they are within the tchum, ki'ilu layatza, and they are, as they were before, within their tchum of their markem hashvisa, they can go without any problems. Next, says the Mishnah, again, against one's will, a person was brought outside his or her tchum, but not out in the midbar, not out there in the forest. They were brought in another city, or nisanu b'dira b'sad, or they were put in some sort of corral, some sort of fold, some sort of enclosed area. And if someone would have been koine hishavisa in that location, they wouldn't even count that location as part of the 2,000 amas. You would only begin counting the 2,000 amas beyond that location, because you have your daladamas, and your daladamas here in LA is the whole Los Angeles. So here we have a machlekes, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah oimrim. We just mentioned them from Shabbos, Daf Chav Zayin Chav Ches, right? The co-leaders of the Yeshiva in Yavne, the Mahalach Eskula. Okay, they have daladamas, but daladamas is that entire enclosed area. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva, upa. Oimrim ein loy elo daladamas. No, if you begin Shabbos in an enclosed area, yes, that you only start counting the 2,000 amas outside that enclosed area. But now that you broke the tchum, even in the case where it was against your will, you went beyond your tchum, you are mamish bound to daladamas. And now we have a maisa that appears to contradict what we just learned. Says the Mishnah, maisa shabo miplan drasin. I'm pronouncing this correctly, that I will say there were 4 Tanoim, that they were traveling from Plan Dasan. And he fligos vinosabayam, and their ship moved out to sea. What happened there is that the ship was at the port when Shabbos came in. So now when Shabbos came in, they are in the city, they have 2,000 amas, not more, and now the sea gate. So it came a moment that the ship is going, the ship went beyond their tchum. This is mamish, the case of the Mishnah. Question is, are they stuck to Dalad Amas in the ship, Nebuch? Or can they at least walk in the ship wherever they want? Because the whole ship is like Dalad Amas. So Rabbi Gamliel and Abba Lazar ben Azariah, Holchos Kula, they were there. They did what they paskin like. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva, Loizozu midalad ames. Now here comes the very difficult words. They wanted to be machmer, and as the Gemara is going to ask, what do you mean they wanted to be machmer? We just learned in the Mishnah that they hold that me'ikar adin, you only have dalad ames. We're going to wait for the Gemara to get that answer. Now, pa'machas, another story. There were Tanoim that were on a ship while it was Friday. And the ship is coming into the port on Shabbos, but it didn't arrive before Shabbos. Now here again, guys, if when Shabbos would have come in, they would have been beyond 2,000 amas from the Nomol, then you got a problem. It goes back into the same achloikas, means that they went beyond the 2,000 amas. They are stuck to Dalad Amas. Now, if you can consider the whole city Dalad Amas is Einzach, but they wanted to know what happened over there. So, can we go off the ship? Meaning that if the ship, when Shabbos would have come in, would have been beyond 2,000 amas, then we would have to remain on the ship for the whole Shabbos. So, but you know why you are allowed to whatever the lashon is, you can go off the ship. I was observing the port. I was looking when Shabbos was coming in. And I know that we were already within the 2,000 amas. So once you are within 2,000 amas of a city, then there's no issues over here. Then not only can you walk up until the city, but then you can walk the whole city if the city is 1,000 times 2,000 amas, because it was within your tchum. Says the Gemara, let's begin. There are 3 things that cause a person to violate his own will, and violate the will of his creator. That idolaters throughout history would force us to convert, to shmad, to do things that are against our will and God's will. The ruach ra is any type of mental illness. Mental illness causes people to do something that they don't really want to do. And the demands of poverty. Because when a person chas v'shalom is so impoverished, you do things that you would never want to do, but you have no option. You need food. L'maynaf kemina, to know that there are 3 things that mavirin es adam. So the Gemara says, liboye rachmim alayu, for you to constantly pray to be spared from them, because none of these 3 things are that foreign from people. Even today, that there are goyim of their cultures and they force their will on your will. Ruach ra, everyone is open to the possibility of having mental illnesses, and the duki anius, hakoba de shamayim, right? We daven for parnasa, but who knows? Gimel ein roim pnei Gehenim. There are 3 that they suffer so much that they are already in Gehenim, so they're never going to see even the face of Gehenim. We learned in ERUVIN or in Shabbos, right? Avraham Avinu was sitting on the Pesach of Gan Eden, of Gehenim, and if a person didn't violate their bris, he'll schlep them out of Gehenim, but they see the face of Gehenim. There are 3 people that don't even come near there. The Elohein, again, Digduke Anios, a person who's mamish impoverished, to the point that there are certain demands of the poverty that goes against everything that person would like to do. The Choyle Ma'ayin, having intestinal or stomach illnesses. We have a few times in Chazal, we have in Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches, and Ashkafta the Rebbe, right? Ruban Sadikin Misasan, B'choyle Ma'ayin, and V'harashus, pursuits of creditors. That whole delicate halacha that if you lend someone money, there's a limitation of how much you can demand it of them, because to be on the other side is mamish Gehenim, so you don't have to go to Gehenim. Here we go, a 4th. you have an ishara, you'll never go to Gehenna. Says the Gemara, so why is there even a machlokes about that? So he says, because ishara mitzvah legarsha. This, everything that we mentioned is not up to you, right? Digduke anius, choyla ma'ayim. Yeah, we have to take care of it. Tzinem pachim is not bidei shamayim. Tzinem pachim we can take care of. Choyla ma'ayim, tzadikim took care of themselves, but it's an illness, right? Pursuits of creditors. Again, it's not in your hands. Divorce her. If you didn't divorce her, what, you're going to be exempt from Gehenna? You chose that. No, a person doesn't always have an option to divorce his wife. Zimnin d'ksuvas ameruba. Because here, the alimony that support, he cannot afford to divorce. Inami, or even if he has the money to divorce, Islay Banan Mina, he has children with her, and therefore, Matzi Megarishla. Wow. Now, here the Gemara gives like a very important answer. Which means, my friends, the pshat of the Gemara is that even this yid, that Nebach is going through these types of tzaddis, if that person is not accepting it, ma'ahava, then it's not going to take the place of Gehenna. It only brings about atonement when the person accepts the hashgacha pratis, you daven, you do everything you could to get out of it. But you acknowledge that God is giving this to you for a reason. That Kabbalah is what brings about the atonement. And now the final, shloisha mesim k'sheim v'saprim. There are three people that go from healthy to, God forbid, passing away very quick. The way Chazal said very quick is while they're talking, they pass away. And who are the three? Choyla ma'ayin is something that could deteriorate one's health extremely quick. You begin talking healthy, and at the end, the person is in Gan Eden already. V'chaya, a woman who's giving birth, and v'hidroikon, a certain type of illness, that's sometimes dropsy, or many other possible meanings of hidroikon. L'may nafkamina, here the Gemara gives, before we spoke about davening, then we spoke about a person internally being makabel da'ava, and here we're giving practical advice. Prepare your shrouds. Preparing your shrouds means is that when a person is aware that they can go from very healthy to immediately not being here, put your house in order. If a person who was diagnosed with hidroikon, put your house in order. A chaya should put her house in order. A person who has choyla ma'ayin, that's the pshat, why it's negeya to know about these three. Okay, now let's come back to ERUVIN. So the first thing we learned in the Mishnah is that if Goyim brought a person against his will beyond the tchum, he only has those daladamas. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Yatzol das, the person left willingly, he an aveda, but then anyway ela daladamas. So the Gemara says, who needed an amayda? Isn't that clearly inferred from the Tanach? Shita. Hashta me, the first white line shoytziu nachim. Even though he went out unwillingly, nevertheless, Einlei Ela Daladamis. So I need Shmuel, Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, to tell me Yotzal Adas Miboya. Ela clarifies indeed what these Amoraim are being Machadesh. Ema Chazar Ladas. If Goyim took you out against your will, and you are stuck, you're not allowed to go more than Daladamas. But if you returned willingly, you didn't benefit anything. Einlei Ela Daladamas. Again asks the Gemara, that is also clearly inferred from the Mishnah. Hanami Tanina, it says in our Mishnah that Hechziru Nachrim, only if Goyim brought you back, only then Ki'ilu Lo Yatsa, and you're free to roam in your Tchum. Doesn't that clearly imply that Hechziru, who the Ki'ilu Lo Yatsa? Only then, Avalotziu Nachrim, but V'chazal Das, Einlei Daladamas. So again, Pshit, why do we need them to state that? Ella Ema, this is what they said. In other words, everything that we're saying now was emes, but we didn't need them. We know that from the Mishnah. What they were machadish was yotzal das, a person violated chum, and they left the 2,000 amos. But now they have siru nachrim. Now they did tshuva. Now they only have daladamas, and they were brought back by nachrim against their will. So you might have thought that over here, at least they are allowed to go back as it was. Here also, einlei ela daladamas. But again, the Gemara says, isn't that inferred clearly from the Mishnah? Hanami Tanina, because the Mishnah gave a case, which is l'chora one case, if the Goyim took you out against your will, and then they brought you back against your will, then ki'ilu lo yatsa. And again, that implies only if both things happened against your will is when ki'ilu lo yatsa. But if hoitziu Only if both. So the Gemara says, no, that, now we're going to stand our ground. Without Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, we might have learned the Mishnah speaking about two cases, not one case. Either Misha Hitziu Nachrim, then V'chazer Lodas, that's a sin. The last thing happened with sin. But Avo, maybe you might have thought, and that's the Mishnah is not even addressing this case, that Yotza Lodas, which is a sin, but now you did Shuvah. Now you were not going to go back. It's only the Goyim that brought you back. So at least here we can say your current location was against your will, maybe Ki'il Lo Yotza. So Kamash Malan, indeed, that the Mishnah is not Litzadavim. That the only time if one left the Daladamas, they left their Tchum, will they ever be allowed to go back to use their Tchum is if both the going out and the coming back was against one's will, whether externally by Nachrim, whether internally because of Ruach Ra. But if either one of these steps was Lodas, you are always bound to Dalodas. Okay, weiter. We asked of Rabbi, if a person is within a Tchum, but there is no private place for one to relieve oneself. The only place where the person will have privacy is by going beyond the Tchum. Are you allowed to go out of your Tchum? So Amar Lohem Gadol Kaved Abrias, that in certain circumstances that it's doiche, even a loisa shesha b'toira. Brachas Yutesh Shabbos Peyalef Menachas Lamed Zayin Megillah Dav Gimel. So Zikr over here, if you have to go to the restroom, you are allowed to go out of your Tchum. So now, Amar Nardoi, they said in the city of Nardoi, if this person is smart, Ayol L'Tchuma, the Kivin the all. What did we just say? What we just said is that you are allowed, so to say, you're not violating. If you're going to use the restroom, what happens? Let's go back to one of the cases we discussed above. Goyim took you out of your Tchum, but they left you there. Now we learned there's nothing you can do. Right, if you go back Lodas, you still only have Daladamas. But if you're going to go back inside your Tchum to go to the bathroom, and that is an action that you are compelled, you needed to go to the restroom, and Gavul Kadol Abrias, now it's as if Goyim brought you back, or Ruach Ra brought you back, and now you're back to the din of what? All right, Chevra, we're going to start with Rav Papa, and God willing, we'll continue this on Nachman Beis. Amar Rav Papa, right? 4 lines from the bottom of the other. That Peiroi sheyatzu chutz l'tchum. Like we mentioned in the intro, that just like a person is bound to his or her Tchum Shabbos, everything that you own is bound by the person's Tchum. It's not where were those Peiros. The Peiros are not koine shvis on their own. We're going to have more dinim about that on Nachman Dala. The Rada Hefker, we already mentioned it above. But everything that belongs to me is bound by my Tchum. And it says Rav Papa paid a shiyatzu l'tchum. It went out of the tchum of the owner, and now the chazru even afilu b'mezid. Not like we learned in the Mishnah. Well, actually, I take that back. Rav Papa says that's exactly what we learned in the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah teach you? The Mishnah taught us that if something went out, a person, and then returned, both movements were the Ratzei and the Shuv were against your will, then you're back to the way it was. An inanimate object, Peiros, doesn't have any will. Someone moving Peiros, from the Peiros' perspective, it was against their will. They were happy sitting where they were. My Tama Anusim. So that's therefore, if they left the Tchum and they were brought back, even if the person that did it demazed, but the Peiros are not trapped. And let's begin to challenge Rav Papa. Frag the Gemara. Esvei Rabbi Yosef bar Shmuel Rav Papa. It says in a Braisa that Rav Nechemia and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Oimrim lo oilo masurim at sheyachzru l'koimam. Right? Shoygigin in mezid loy. So the Gemara says that this is a machlokes tanoim. We'll stop over here, and God willing, we'll pick up with this machlokes in the next year. All right, Chevra. That was a big hashgacha process because my camera was not plugged in. And mamash, in a minute or two, I would lose the whole class. But that didn't happen because we finished on time. All right, we're good. So, Chevra, tomorrow morning, we have a little break.
Shkaya. It's a good thing you started Rav Papa there.
I'm sorry?
I said, it's a good thing you started Rav Papa. And then you shut it. All right. Got a few extra lines. All right, Fabrengen now, right?
Now into slichos, yeah.
All right.
Yashikach, Rabbi.